Signed up for 90 days. We got some of them trained. We got 35,000 trained. Took us a little while, and they're about the end of their enlistment, but it's perfect. We're going to go down there, whip these Confederates. Allah, everything's over. So, on July 16th of 1861, July 16th of 1861, General McDowell takes his 35,000 Union soldiers, leaves Washington, D.C., and marches towards Richmond. Very good. I have this a little out of order, but you'll figure it out. Union forces camp at Centerville, Virginia, which is just outside Manassas Junction, Virginia. And Centerville is spelled correctly on the ID sheet. It's not ER, it's RE. So, McDowell marches his 35,000 Union soldiers, and he stops to camp at Centerville, Virginia, which is just outside another town in Virginia known as Manassas Junction, Virginia. Does that make sense? He marched around from D.C. into Virginia, and he stops and camps at Centerville, which is not too far from Manassas. Now, Manassas Junction, Virginia is a railroad center in the south, and it's located right next to Bull Run Creek. Okay, that's where these names come from. So Manassas Junction, where McDowell and the 35,000 Union are camped next to, pretty close to, in Centerville, is a railroad center in the south, near a creek called Bull Run Creek. You know who's at Manassas Junction camped? The Confederates. 22,000 strong, under the leadership of Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard. So as McDowell and his 35,000 are camped at Centerville, Virginia, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard and his 22,000 rebel or Confederate soldiers are camped at Manassas Junction. Why in the world would they be at Manassas Junction, Elisa? What is Manassas Junction? It's a railroad center, so why would they be there? Because they're protecting one of the few railroad lines that they have the ability to own. Because where are most of the railroads? North. So it's important. That's why they're there. So McDowell has this plan in the back of his mind that he's going to march down there to Manassas. He's going to kick butt and take names. War's going to be over. 90-day enlistment's over. He's the hero of the day. South succumbs to Northern supremacy. History. That's his thought. Now, these Union people, whether they be soldiers or high-class people or Lincoln himself or whoever, are way overconfident of victory. And I'm going to give you some examples that you may not even believe. Here's some examples of how overconfident people were. These Union Army soldiers, as they marched towards Richmond, stopping at Centerville, they're so confident they stop and pick blackberries along the way to eat. That's how serious they are. The Union marches from Washington, D.C., they come down towards Richmond, they're picking blackberries on the way down. They don't have their game face on, right? They haven't got their game face on. Pretty confident, okay? Another example is a prominent politician, probably a senator or a congressman, back in Washington, D.C., when hearing of this battle that was coming up, was quoted as saying he would, quote, be happy to drink all the blood spilled in this little war. That's how confident he was that these Southerners were going to turn tail and run. That he would be more than confident to drink any spilled blood in this little war. Boy, what if he'd had to drink all the blood spilled in this war? He never would have ever, obviously, never got it done. But he was that confident. He says, I'll be happy to drink all the blood spilled in this little war. Because he didn't think there was going to be much blood spilled because the South was going to turn and head out when they were confronted. Another example. This is the one that is amazing to me. Sightseers came. People like senators, judges, high society women, big whoopee-doo important people actually rode carriages down there and packed picnic lunches like they were watching a sporting event. I'm not kidding you. These people actually made plans to take their carriages down to Bull Run Creek and sit there in the bleachers, so to speak, and watch the North kick heck out of the South. They were sitting there, I'm not kidding you, if you can believe that. That's how confident they were. They thought this thing would last minutes, maybe hours, not many though. Well, it turned out that this Battle of Bull Run is going to last all day. Confederates and Union forces are going to fight each other all day long. Not going to be very pleasurable for those sightseers, and we'll show you some examples of that later. So instead of a short battle, the Battle of Bull Run lasts all day with Confederate soldiers engaging Union soldiers. Now, we're going to kind of go back and tell you how this was just kind of a cluster. We watched a video in here called 10 Things You Didn't Know About the American Flag. And one thing they told you back when we kind of started was that during the Battle of Bull Run, which you probably didn't know what they were talking about at the time, there was confusion because the two flags looked too much alike. Do you remember that? They also mentioned briefly, and I'll go into more detail, that there was no standard uniform picked for the North or the South. It was assumed that the North would wear blue and the South would wear gray. But unfortunately, some examples are the Massachusetts infantry who fought at the Battle of Bull Run from the North didn't have any uniforms, new ones for the ball game. So they used their militia uniforms, which were gray. The Virginia infantry, who didn't have new uniforms for the Civil War, wore their militia uniforms, which ironically were blue. So friendly fire was just going to happen. Now, to take some precautions, the Virginia infantry, their commanders ordered them to take white cloth and wrap it around their arm and their hat band, and told, obviously, the Confederate side that, hey, if you see guys in blue uniforms with white armbands and or white hat bands made out of cloth, or you make sure you don't shoot them because they're on our side.
That was the South?
That was the South, yeah. The Virginia infantry, because they had blue uniforms, were ordered to tie white cloth around their arms and or the brims of their hat, and the word got out among the Confederates, don't shoot anybody in blue uniforms with white on their arms or hats. Well, what would happen in a battle? Is it possible you might lose your white?
You might not end up being so white.
Yeah, it might not have your white on your uniform. Well, it was also stated that if you were in the Virginia infantry and you lost your white armband or headband or didn't have time to put one on, if you were confronted by Confederate troops, you would take your right hand, put it on your left breast, hold out your weapon and yell, "Our homes! Our homes!" That way, if you knew the signal, they wouldn't shoot you. That's a true story. So this Battle of Bull Run is going to be kind of a cluster from the first. You got overconfident Union troops, you got sightseers there watching the battle like it's some sort of a sporting event. You got flags that look too much alike. You got uniforms that are the wrong color. The other day I refereed a junior high quad down there at the middle school. That was outstanding, by the way. And Warland came out to play Cody. And Warland comes out in their dark green uniforms, and Cody comes out in their dark blue uniforms. And I was just going, really? I mean, I'm refereeing a junior high 7th grade game, and I'm going, this is not very convenient. It's hard to tell who's who. Well, I can't imagine the Battle of Bull Run how I'm trying to figure that out when you're actually shooting at people, right? So I kind of got that. And I knew we were going to be talking about this in class, and so I'm thinking, interesting. Now, going back to the battle itself. On July 21st of 1861, 5 days after McDowell marches his soldiers from D.C., where they are now camped at Centerville, Virginia. They leave their camp and march towards Manassas Junction to do this battle. So early in the morning of July 21st, 1861, Union forces leave their camp at Centerville, Virginia, and they actually have a pretty good strategy, which I'm going to show you here. You kind of look at this. Green is Confederates. Although I should have, I'll just go with this. So here come the Union, this way. Their goal is to attack the left side of the Confederate lines and the right side of the Confederate lines and kind of pinch them in. In the meantime, they're going to send a 3rd unit to try to get around the back, kind of like Andrew Jackson did at the Battle of Tallapoosa, remember? Against the Red Sticks. That was the strategy. And it actually worked pretty well for a period of time. Well, these guys were stationed on Matthews Hill, which is a hill outside of Manassas Junction. And they got so much Union pressure against them, they began to retreat and head towards another hill to try to get behind it, so to speak, called Henry Hill. So the Confederates are getting beat up pretty good at Matthews Hill near Manassas Junction. They crack under the Union pressure. They begin to retreat toward a nearby hill called Henry Hill. Not McHenry Hill, but Henry Hill. Well, standing on top of Henry Hill with many Confederate reinforcements was a Confederate general by the name of Thomas Jackson. So as these Confederate soldiers are retreating in panic, being chased by Union forces from Matthews Hill, heading towards Henry Hill, sitting on top of Henry Hill is Confederate General Thomas Jackson and many reinforcements. Well, Jackson sat at the top of Henry Hill watching these retreating rebels by the hundreds coming at him. Is that what he wants them doing? No, because he's got these reinforcements, and what's he planning on doing? Attacking. Okay, so Thomas Jackson puts himself in jeopardy and himself alone, and he rides towards these retreating Confederate soldiers coming from Matthews Hill in the line of fire, telling them to turn and resume fighting. Okay, pretty heroic act, because he takes off himself and gets himself in the middle of the fighting and tries to get those men to turn around and head back towards Matthews Hill. Everybody picturing that in their mind? So Jackson witnesses the retreating rebel soldiers coming toward him. He rides towards the fire, stops them, and rallies them back to the fight. Well, a Confederate general by the name of Bernard B. witnesses this heroic act on the part of Thomas Jackson. He witnesses this. He's pretty impressed by it. The fact that Jackson put himself in harm's way to rally those Confederates and get them to turn around and go back to the fight, right? Well, Bernard B. makes a famous statement, yells out to the other men, and he says, "Look at Jackson, standing like a stone wall." From that point on, Thomas Jackson isn't known as Thomas Jackson. He's known as Stonewall Jackson. True story. So I'll repeat that again, just so you get that, because it's kind of cool. So when General Jackson witnesses the retreating rebels coming from Matthews Hill under fire, he rides towards them in the heat of the battle and gets them to rally and turn around. Confederate General Bernard B., who's watching from Matthews Hill with the reinforcements, turns to the men on Henry Hill that are going to reinforce this battle, and he yells, "Look at Jackson, standing like a stone wall." And from that point on, General Jackson earned the permanent nickname Stonewall Jackson. Now, last thing I'll tell you today is after Jackson's heroics and he got these men turned, we're going to talk tomorrow about a massive collision between Union and Confederate forces at Henry Hill. We're going to have a big fight at Henry Hill. Okay? Big fight. And we'll tell you what happens in that fight tomorrow. And then we're gonna show you a video on the first Battle of Bull Run. I think you'll enjoy. And ice cream. We're gonna go get it right now. So, Lily, you're younger than I am. Run down to my room and grab 2 full boxes. They will be both vanilla of ice cream that's in the freezer and the guidance office in the fridge, okay? There's 1 box there that's half and half, so bring the 2 full ones. I think you might, because I'm kind of fond of you, McHenry. Your dad's going to be happy when you change your name. Oh, thank you. Everybody in the world knows I'm fond of McHenry now.